former ambassador of Bolivia to the United Nations, and chief negotiator on climate change. And of course, he famously stood alone in the General Assembly of the Climate Change Conference. Would you start with telling us about that incident?
Well, it was 1 year ago in Cancun. The last day, that Friday, at about 5 p.m., they presented a text that wasn't a text that was negotiated by all parties. So we said, we want to negotiate that text. We cannot approve it just like a take it or leave it document. And they said, no, that is what you have to do. And then we said, we oppose and we object this text. Why? Because it establishes emissions reductions that are very low, and that would lead us to a scenario of an increase in the temperature of 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. And so at that time we clearly said 350,000 persons are dying because of natural disasters that have to do with climate change. We cannot be part of a genocide, of an ecocide. It doesn't matter if you are alone or not. You have a conscience. You cannot approve something that you know it's going to harm humanity in a very strong way. And the problem that we are facing now in Durban is that those numbers are still the same, and they are going to be locked here in Durban. So this proposal that of pledge and review, do whatever you want, is now going to be in some way formalized here in Durban, with the form of the Kyoto Protocol and the form of the new mandate for a new legally binding agreement. But in substance, the key issue is what is going to be the emission reductions of developed countries? Is it going to be something that will allow us to stabilize the temperature in a safe zone, or it means to increase the temperature to a level where we are going to see a catastrophe?
As far as I remember, because I was not at Cancun, which is why I don't remember, but I was at Copenhagen, and the same thing happened. Because when the Copenhagen Accord was presented to the Assembly, it was actually, they were trying to say it as if it's accepted by the Assembly. Finally, Bolivia objected again.
Yes, I was also in Copenhagen. In that time, they presented the text at 2 a.m. in the morning. One day after the conference should have ended. And they said to us, you have 60 minutes to read this text and come back and we will adopt it. And then there was a whole insurrection there. Many delegates said, this can't be. Because, you know, in Copenhagen, the issue was that we knew about that document because President Obama announced it through the TV. So we were negotiating, I remember in G77, and suddenly in the media they began to say there is already an accord. And we said, well, what are we doing here? We are negotiating something that in some other place has been already agreed. Now that history repeated in Cancun, and it's now repeating here in Durban. That means that who takes the decisions are not the delegates. No? It's an illusion that the real negotiation is taking place here. No, the real negotiation is in small dinners where only some ministers of some powerful countries and from some regions are invited, and they take the decisions. The document that we all know as the amalgamated text won't be the document that's going to be adopted even in a short version by Friday.
Now, given all this, do you think that, because there has been suddenly a talk at the end of last week that Kyoto Protocol to the developing countries are suddenly standing firm upon it, saying that no new treaty unless there are some substantial developments and pledges, actual emissions which are mandated for the developed countries under Kyoto Protocol, the second commitment period. You think that will happen?
I think what we will have is a second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, but as an empty shell. No? So in order to sell to the public opinion that there is a second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, they will present that as an outcome. But when you begin to read what has been written inside that second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol, you will see that it's a different system than the one we have until now. It's going to be the system of pledge and review.
Even in the Kyoto Protocol, second commitment.
Even inside.
But why will we accept it? By we are from India, by the way. So why would we accept it? Because even India now is saying that it should be protocol. I mean, it should be the second commitment period should be firm commitments, 25 to 40% from the developed countries.
I know that is what G77 is saying, but and I hope that will happen. Really, my experience shows me that by Friday we're going to have the chapeau of the second commitment period. But what's inside there will be not commitments, but pledges, because they have changed the language. One thing is commitment, another thing is pledges. Second, we're going to have pledges inside the second KP. We are not going to have an aggregate number. So now, Annex 1 parties, developed countries, have agreed to reduce in the first commitment period for 5.2% of their greenhouse gas emissions, taking into account the levels of 1990. That was for the first commitment period. How much are we developing countries asking for the second commitment period? A figure that should be between 40% to 50%. What is going to be inside the second KP? No number, because they don't want to show the reality. There will be only a list of the pledges. Of all the Annex 1 parties? No, only of some, mainly Europe. Is US, Canada going to increase its commitments or pledges to reduce its emissions? No, they are going to be so low as they were in Cancun. You know how much is in Cancun? 3% of emission reductions for the US until the year 2020. So they are going to do nothing until the year 2020. So, I mean, I want to have a KP, but you cannot try to fool around with me. It's not the issue of KP or not KP. What is the number? How much are you going to reduce? Because if you give me KP and you say, I'm going to give you KP, and in exchange I'm going to do nothing, I say, well, let's discuss the real issue is how much you're going to reduce. 3%? That's ridiculous.
Okay, so now we've dealt